Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Lighthouse Sessions. Today, I have my new friend, Carrie Richardson, with me. Carrie, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Okay. Thanks, Jeff. Nice to be here today. So I work with managed IT service providers, and I help them develop better sales strategy so that they can create better sales process supported by sales documentation in order to be able to hire, train, coach, and retain better sales talent so they can close more monthly recurring revenue in a shorter period of time.
I love that. And for anybody who's watching, they know you hit some of my favorite phrases and words there because I'm a big fan, especially visionary entrepreneurs. We need systems, we need processes. And probably the first thing I tell people is you've got to scale your sales department. And we'll talk about how you develop this particular focus. Because in my world, if you are in charge of sales, you own a job, not a business, and it's going to always be up and down based on your mood. Is that fair?
100%. If a company is relying on me 100% to grow, we're probably not going to be consistent. Something comes up. Client work always supersedes sales work, especially in a startup environment. It's easier to keep a client than it is to sign a new one. So if we need to support a business on our roster, that will always get done before trying to acquire a new client.
I love that. And before we went on air, you mentioned that this is your fourth business. So you and I are going to go on a slight tangent and talk about the niche, because I swear I'm the crazy guy shouting from the rooftops and everybody's like, what's he saying? Tell me, what lessons did you learn that brought you to the point where you focus specifically on the IT space?
So when I started my business, I was, I guess, an accidental entrepreneur. We describe them that way. I had just found out that I was expecting, and I was 22 weeks pregnant, and really just thought that I was getting fat because I was like in my 40s, and I was like, no, can't be possible. But it was. And at the time, I was a competitive Muay Thai kickboxer. I trained with the UFC. I studied in Thailand. Now, there's not a lot of call for pregnant kickboxing instructors. And my husband at the time had just left his job in public service to go and work for a nonprofit. And I think it paid like $35,000 a year. We weren't planning on having kids. This was a surprise for both of us. And I was kind of in this immediate, like, all right, well, what am I going to do now? I'm not going to make my husband go back to work at this job that he didn't care for. He loves what he's doing. He loves working for the group that he's with now. So what can I do? What am I good at? I was like, well, I'm pretty good at cold calling. I was in sales for a lot of my career before I'd gotten into fitness. So I thought, well, maybe somebody would pay me to make their cold calls for them, and I could schedule sales appointments. And that's something I could do from my house. I could do it with the baby in one of those little things. And so I started just like going through this is how long ago we started. Opened up the local newspaper in Winnipeg and started calling anybody that had an ad in the paper looking for sales. I mean, like, maybe you don't need someone to maybe you don't need a sales rep. Maybe you just need someone to schedule good sales meetings for your current sales reps. Finally, so someone said yes. It was a marketing company, and I was doing campaigns for their clients. And I kept looking for more business. I got referrals to other companies. And eventually I had a network of stay-at-home moms like myself making phone calls in between, nap time and whatever they could, and figured out pretty quickly that it's very difficult to support 10 different companies in 10 different industries, right? If somebody is sick that day, I can't bill for their time. And so if somebody doesn't come to work, that's it. I don't get paid that day. They don't get paid. I don't get paid. So we identified this opportunity in the managed IT services space. One of my clients said, hey, my friend who owns an IT company, their telemarketer just quit. Could you schedule sales appointments for managed IT firms? Yeah, of course I can. I was like, managed IT, what the hell is that?
Let me search that up.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, we can. I'm saying, yeah, we can do it, no problem. Turns out it's not that easy, but it's not that difficult either. And when we realized that most IT entrepreneurs shared the same challenges, right? They were technical. They weren't necessarily interested in the sales part of the business. They'd grown their business through referrals and word of mouth, and they get to the point where they have a major attrition event. And they grow fairly steadily, and then all of a sudden something happens. Right? Either they're no longer to balance the understaffed, overstaffed seesaw, and their margins start tanking, or they are the referrals dry out before they've built a process to follow to secure more opportunities. So their pipeline is completely dead, and now they're kind of in panic mode. So we built this outbound calling practice around the managed IT services space. And then we realized by building this database of managed service providers and prospecting into it constantly, we were developing this incredible list of IT firms. And then I had another vendor approach me and say, you guys call a lot of IT companies every day. Like, what would you charge to schedule meetings with the IT companies that you're calling? And I was like, oh. And then all of a sudden I realized, like, whoa, we've been doing it wrong all along. Like the IT companies are the product.
Yeah.
They aren't the client. So we pivoted at that time and started working with companies like Cisco and Sophos and large IT vendors looking for reseller partners. We'd been working for the reseller partners. We were able to develop a great practice around this appointment setting service for IT vendors in the North American market that wanted to secure appointments with companies that might resell their products. So if you sold to or through the IT channel between 2012 and 2020, we probably worked with that company at some point, either when they were starting out and they just got funding and they didn't have a list of MSPs, which is a huge challenge in our space. MSPs don't fit a specific SIC code or NAICS code. So there's 10 or 15 different codes. So you classify your business when you start it. It goes into this government database, and maybe your IT and computer networking, or maybe your software as a service, or maybe you're a million things, right? So
yeah, and there's always staffing on the back end too, right?
Pardon me?
There's always one that says, "Oh, and we do staffing as well."
Yeah. No, there's a lot more of those these days than there were. It's like MSPs start new, then they develop something to eliminate part of the workload, and then they want to resell it to their peers. And then there seems to be a trend of like pillaging the profits from the MSP in order to support the development of the product. And we did that a little bit with our consulting practice when we built this new product. So we took all of the data, we took all of the information that we'd secured over the course of outbound calling for 10 plus years, over 50 plus accounts. And we had 5 million data points to begin building a really good outbound training program with. And then we took that, we developed all the processes that somebody would need to follow in order to use the education that we created. And then, AI was not available to us when I started my business. And then after I sold my business, we kept all of the data. And then somebody said, what are you going to do with all that data? And I was like, I don't know. So I handed it off to the company that taught OpenAI how to pass the bar exam.
Oh, cool.
And said, like, tell me what we could, what could we do with this? And they came back with a laundry list of like 20 different things we could do with it. And I was like, all right, well, which one will actually make us money though? So we had another organization come and say, like, here are the different ways that you could monetize this data. Here's what we could do to identify different ways to utilize it. And we kind of honed in on the 3 or 4 that we thought were the most viable. And then they started building things for us.
I love that. And, it is fascinating. My guests always say, what are your standard questions? And I'm like, if you show me a standard entrepreneur, I'll give you a standard list of questions, because there's always that spark moment is, an opportunity / challenge. You had a new baby coming, and then you looked at it. And I think that's where I love the niche is once you understand your niche better than they understand themselves, you can find new ways to serve them.
Yeah. Although it can get problematic because you can't go into a conversation assuming that their problems are the same. I mean, they are, frankly. I've yet to see, but if you tell them, and I was terrible for this when I first started, working in this niche, I kind of had learned so much about it, and I could tell you what your problems were before you could. And I'd never owned a managed IT company, but I'd worked with so many of them at that stage in their development that I feel like I wasn't as engaged in the sales conversations as I could have been. I wasn't asking questions. I was telling them what they needed, and people don't really like to be told what they need. You kind of have to lead them to a place where they're like, oh, well, that would definitely, that is a problem we're having. Oh, well, that would definitely solve that problem. So I did have to work on my own. There's a difference between appointment setting, which was something I was incredibly good at, and sales discovery, which was something that I learned and got better at when I met somebody who was really engaged in sales discovery. And his name is Walter Crosby. He owns a company called Helix Sales Development. And he's been just a phenomenal resource for learning how to do sales discovery that isn't just essentially I was just bowling over my prospects, right? And I also was talking to all of them as if they were visionaries too.
Yeah.
Right. So a visionary entrepreneur talking to, I guess if you're going to use EOS speak, an integrator entrepreneur. I'm way up here painting this amazing picture of what the future is going to look like. And he's down here asking me questions about data. I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah. And he's starting to fume because you're painting a picture and he's like, no, I want the data point. So
trying to figure out at the beginning of the sales conversation, is this person someone that I'm going to, we call it monkey out with, because that's one of the things that we do is a personality test called Making a Difference through the Eagle Center for Leadership. It's a very simple, forget about Clifton Strengths or Kolbe or all of the very elaborate, complex. First, we need to figure out all this data, and then we need an entire course to figure out how to read the data and integrate it into our business. This is I think it's a 12-question test, and it gives you an animal, and the animal has these characteristics, and here's how this animal can create a better communication with this animal. And there's only 4 animals. So it's a lot simpler than some of the more complex, Clifton Strengths don't no, I can't even. I went to a seminar where they did the mini version of that.
Yeah.
I was bored of it by question 8. I was like, how many of these do you want me to answer?
Well, and for what it's worth, Carrie, I love Kolbe, but as far as I know, all I need to know about Kolbe is that I'm a high quick start and that high fact finders drive me crazy.
But you got to learn to work with them, and you got to learn to sell to them.
I've learned to pass them off to other people. So, but again, and that's the thing, I'm a crazy visionary founder. So for me, it was okay, who drives me nuts? Okay, let's just find a way to entertain them somewhere else. But the other thing I will share is that my audience, for some reason, we have a literal addiction to assessment. So I will put the link in for the little profile, because I think it's always good to have more insights than less. And yes, I agree. Most people have to deal with regular people and, people in all their stripes and
regular people.
or monkeys or whatever they are. But the beautiful thing as a visionary entrepreneur, I've decided I'm just going to deal with others like me, and I annoy people way less when I'm in the right room. So
I've just learned to like talk less in those rooms because I can take over the conversation, and I had to learn some skills for that, right? Like a visionary can suck the air out of the room really quickly, especially when they're surrounded. I mean, if my business was filled with other visionaries, nothing would ever get done. We would have the best ideas in the world and zero execution, because like I like to start projects. Oh, I love to start projects. I love it. But I don't want to plan them. I just want to start, and I want to figure it out as I go.
And God forbid, oh, you want me to finish it? Forget about it.
Yeah, no. I'm really good at doing like the first 3 quarters of any project, and then the final quarter usually ends up being passed off to someone else. But my husband and my business partner is very process driven, and I mean, we're 2 years into this business, and he spent the first, like, he's definitely like, give me whatever. If you give me 12 hours to chop down a tree, I'm going to spend 11 of them sharpening the axe and 1 of them chopping down the tree. That is my business partner. And me, I'm just like, we don't even need an axe. We'll find something. Like, we'll just kick this tree for a while and see what happens. Like, okay, kicking it doesn't work. What else have we got?
That tree's coming down.
We have a chainsaw on a stick. No, I'm not going to read the directions on how to use that thing, right? I'm just going to go up there, and I've been forbidden to use the chainsaw on a stick for that reason. But that's kind of like, you get two people together. Not only are we married and we have different approaches to things, but we're business partners and we have different approaches to things. And we've realized that only one of us can be in charge. So for me, it was the person who was willing to do the accounting and meet with the lawyers. I do like the person who was willing to do all of those things. They get to be in charge because they're better informed. They're willing to fact find. Me, I'm just gonna start I'm gonna poke holes in things until something makes sense to me, and that's not really long-term viable for the survival of a business. It's great in startup mode.
Yeah.
But you know, when I hit the $2 million wall, and that's very common for my clients as well, there seems to be this like badlands around the $2 million mark where the margins start to go like this and the work starts to go like this, and you seem to be repeating a lot of the same mistakes over and over again, and you can't get out of your own way. And that's kind of like, every time I hit that wall, I realize like, oh, I have to surround myself with other people now. I cannot do this by myself. Like, there's no way that I can take this past. Like, that's where I am. Like, I'm a great person to get you from $0 to $2 million. Yeah. But after that, there's too many people to manage. There's too many moving parts, and there needs to be process, and there needs to be something that's repeatable and scalable. And that's the part where I start to get bored. I'm like, all right, I don't want to do the same thing every day, and I don't want to do it the same way every day.
Yeah.
But that's what works.
Well, and I find it fascinating. So when I first read Traction, I was like, who's this Gino Wickman telling me what to do? And then I later learned that he's actually a visionary entrepreneur, and he built it to support himself. And I went, oh, that makes sense, because I always used to think that systems and processes were things that people did to me, not for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you look at the statistics of businesses, a visionary founder will get you so far and only so far. Now, having said that, if you just have an integrator, you're still perfecting the same things. And you know, I would suspect they have their own challenges, but when you get the right pairing of the visionary and the integrator, then it becomes magical.
Yeah, I had great integrators. I was fortunate enough to work with my family, which was a big surprise, actually, if you had told me that I'd be working with my mother and my sister, neither of whom I was speaking to in my 20s, in my 40s. I wouldn't have believed you, but the reason that we have all this data that we were able to build a product with was because I had integrators who were offboarding clients effectively, storing information properly, making sure the CRM wasn't a complete dumpster fire, right? Doing all of the detail-oriented little, like, organized, like, I can answer any questions you have about my finances because somebody else handled that. Me, I would have just put it all into a file somewhere and then look for the name of this, whatever, like, what did you spend on this in 2025? I don't know. But
That's
my
a
mom
question.
always knew. So.
Perfect. Well, and I think that is a fascinating, and one of the things I believe is if we know ourselves, then we know the help we need. And I do find a lot of visionaries, they're very self-aware until they aren't. We're really good at knowing our bright spots, and we're really good at knowing our really bad blind spots. But sometimes we miss those peripheral areas where we're kind of blind, but kind of bright at the same time. Now, you mentioned earlier, and I think this is worth bringing into the show, before we started recording, you were talking about when somebody works for you, the end result is a higher value exit. So would you mind connecting the dots there? Because I get the connection, and I think most of our audience will, but it's also worth repeating that once you have those systems and processes, you actually have something different than just more clients.
So in the managed IT services space, as well as in most professional services spaces, you start a business and you are everything. Like your sales, your marketing, your support, and
Everything.
The challenge when it comes time to exit a professional services business is, especially in the managed IT space, there is a specific amount of monthly recurring revenue that a company wants you to have before they'd even consider acquiring you. So the big exits in our space start around $5 million in top line with $1 million at the bottom. And before that, you can still have an attractive exit, but it probably won't be a legacy wealth exit. You won't have the same multiples as you will if you're maintaining best in class EBITDA with the right amount of revenue coming in. So before that time, you can still exit. You could participate in a roll up. You could do there's lots of ways to sell your business. But in order to achieve the highest valuation for your business, you have to prove that you are not essential to the business. So for us, even in our pitch deck for this business, we had to show how we would extract ourselves from the business so that we would not be necessary players at exit. So we actually have an 18-month trajectory where at this point, Carrie stops doing this and they're replaced by this person. And Ian stops doing this and they're replaced by this activity. So we've actually shown before we even signed the first client, we understood how we were going to remove ourselves from the sales process because nobody wants to buy a job.
Nope.
So you've got to be completely out of the day-to-day. There can't be anything that the business absolutely relies on you for. So if you're still the person who goes on all the sales discoveries, your valuation will reflect that. You have to be able to prove that the sales system that you've put in place will run effectively without you. Otherwise, you can't leave that business, and the handcuffs that you're going to have are going to be a lot longer than if I can show, like, I haven't been involved in sales since 2024. I haven't picked up the phone to call anybody, haven't done a sales discovery, haven't had to do anything but maybe come in and they're there and handhold a little bit, or maybe work with a high value target account.
I love that. And by the way, that is my favorite conversation is about that valuation, because arguably, a lot of people go into business thinking it's about their revenue and their net income and their after taxes. But my assumption is you're also looking at what's next afterwards, because if all you care about is the net income and how much you take out of the company, you don't care how hard you're working. You don't care about the legacy of it. And I work with a lot of business brokers and M&A people, and they're just annoyed because people have been told, and by the way, the accounting industry will tell you, oh, your business is worth 10x, like they always have these rules of thumb. And it's like, but in my experience, and I want to hear your thoughts, a lot of discounts are applied when the owner is everything, especially sales, because I, as an owner, can close deals because people want to talk to the founder. It's more proof to me that my business is valuable when I have a team that's getting deals closed. What would you say to that, Carrie?
Well, if there's a team that can perform any task without having to be an extraordinary time suck to leadership before or after the task, right, the business will be more valuable. Right? If you have to be able to demonstrate that once you remove Carrie from the picture, the business continues to thrive. All of the clients aren't going to leave because they wanted to talk to Carrie and Carrie's not there to take their phone call anymore. So most of the time, what we see when the owner is the primary driver of business or sales in the organization is an earnout tied to clients staying once the transaction happens. So you could end up in an earnout that lasts 3 or 5 years, right? Don't have contracts? Well, that's swell, but there goes your valuation, right? If you don't have contracts for a 3-year term, well, the private equity firm is going to want you to start converting people over, and your exit valuation may be dependent on your ability to convert your clients who've happily paid you month to month for the last 10 years. You're going to now have to go ask them to sign a 3-year deal. So if you're getting to the point where you're ready to sell your business, you got to start thinking about how are buyers going to view every piece of my business, not just what is my top line and what is my bottom line, but what am I doing here every day that I am essential for? Starting to backfill yourself out of that essential role. It's the only way you're going to get a valuation that's going to be favorable to somebody. Like, I don't want to stick around for 5 years, period. Like, I don't want to watch somebody else strip my baby for parts, right? Like,
Yeah.
If you're going to buy my business, I'm leaving tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I can, because I am not essential to any task within my business. It can all be done without me.
And that's a huge one. I know way too many people, and well said, strip your baby for parts, because that's what an earnout is. Somebody's looking at how do we maximize the assets, and they don't have oh, isn't she cute, or isn't he adorable? No, they're just looking at it for parts.
Yep.
And I think the other thing I'm hearing in what you're saying, and maybe it's just because this is where my brain goes, the more systems and processes, the less involved I am, the more variety of buyer I have. Because there are some businesses, there are some people, believe it or not, they want to buy a job and they'll look at it and say, okay, if I net X dollars a year, that's what you're netting. And by the way, those never work well, because everybody always forgets that now you're feeding 2 families, the seller's family and the buyer's family. Those deals can work, but it's you watch somebody else run your baby into the ground. But if you can get those strategic buyers, you talked about roll-ups. I find it fascinating that more people don't talk about the impact of sales in a roll-up scenario.
Oh, I've done some consulting for companies that did not consider what their cultural differences prior to that. I mean, it's not a merger. It's not like there's always one person that's kind of bringing more to the party. And if you're not looking at the way that are your teams going to be able to play nice with each other after the roll up? I saw an organization in our industry where I want to say 6 different companies came together, all of them members of a specific peer group, and they decided to take 5 $2 million businesses and turn it into one $10 million business, right? Theoretically, that should give you the exit valuation that you want. Everybody's got best in class margins. Everybody comes together, but now we've got too many cooks in the kitchen, and we got too many people that need a specific level before exit. So we can't sell for X multiple, because now we've got 5 people who are going to get paid out so everybody wants a specific, everyone's got their number. And this person owns 30% because their business was bigger, and this person owns 20. And all of a sudden you've got 2 co-CEOs and a bunch of sales team members, and it really isn't a $10 million business. It's still 5 $2 million businesses. Yeah. And nobody's cooperating, and nobody's communicating, and nobody's going to buy that dumpster fire. Right? Like, we really have to think about, how are we going to get everyone on the same page, and who is going to be in charge of this monstrosity by the time we're finished jamming everything together? Are we going to align behind specific tool sets? Yeah. Are we going to align behind specific niches? How are we going to keep feeding the beast? Like, now we've got a $10 million business, and in order to generate enough interest in acquisition, we're going to have to grow by 20% every year. Yeah. Right? Growing a $1 million business by 20% is not that hard. Growing a $10 million business by 20% year over year, that's a little more challenging.
It's harder. And I want to pull out something. So the best advice I ever got, a friend of mine, him and his wife had owned multiple businesses over a 30-year period. And you touched on it, but I said, what's the secret to your success? And he said, there's only one boss. Now, in their business, she's in charge of operations, and he's not allowed to mention anything about ops. He's in charge of marketing and sales, and she's only allowed to say yes, dear, to the marketing and sales piece. And that's the challenge. I think a lot of people create these Frankenstein monsters that take different directions. And, you mentioned 5 $2 million companies. They're pulling in 5 directions. Whereas if you have one $10 million company, everybody knows the direction they're pulling in. So you're getting a lot of challenges, and it could even just be something as simple as niche drift. I've seen that time and time again pull a company apart, because we all agree at the whiteboard that our niche is this, but then somebody comes along and says, well, this one's adjacent to our niche, so this time we'll make an exception. And next thing you know, you're serving little old ladies who, want help with
this paved with exceptions.
Yes. So how do you keep the exceptions to a minimum? And how, I actually, this is a genuine from my heart question. How do you keep your clients, your projects on track with that focus on the niche?
Well, I've been working with the same niche now since 2014. So have there been kind of adjacent organizations that have did we think about working with other niches after going niche specific? Yes, from time to time. And ultimately, for my own business, I would try pretty much anything, right? Like, sure, let's try it. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But there's a difference between an organization that's staffed with $12 to $15 an hour telemarketers and a business that's staffed with $150,000 customer success representatives, engineers. So in my business, if I want to try something different, it might cost me 2 or 3 people at $15 an hour for 90 to 120 days. And if it fails, it fails. It wasn't that expensive. We tried it. It didn't work. Right now, if we're going to take on something that's completely out of scope for us, somebody is going to stop me well before that idea even gets to actually like, hey, we should do this. There will be someone who says, that's not on our roadmap, or that's not in alignment with our mission, that doesn't match up with our core values. Like, there's checks and balances along the way. And if it doesn't get through the gate, it doesn't get through the gate. Like they're saying in Strata, one red makes us dead. So if we're doing an evaluation on, what are there some blue ocean strategies that we haven't considered?
Yeah.
Right? Like, well, there are 100 blue ocean strategies, right? And if you gave me all day, we'd probably have another 100. If all I had to do was sit around and come up with neat ideas of how we might be able to serve this customer using something similar to what we've built already, like, that could be done.
Yeah.
But somebody is going to stop me before, like, one, they're going to say, all right, let me see the plan. Show me the plan on how we're going to execute that. Show me what we're going to not do in order to accomplish this, because we've already made our plan for the quarter. We've already made our plan for the year. We've got a 3-year plan. Where does this fit into it?
Yeah.
So mostly I'm just told, like, got to bring it up at the next quarterly. It's just having like a few, just make it inconvenient for the visionaries in your world to show up with their bag of ideas and dropping them on your desk. Like, I got lots of ideas. All of them are more impractical and expensive than the last idea. And I'm happy to bring those to the table, but somebody is going to say, no, that's not on the right. Like, somebody will hold me accountable to that. I can't just go in and decide that we're going to go off our TCP. Right? That will be something that someone else will have to agree to. And then we're going to have to, we work a plan, and then the plan works. Without a plan, we don't execute on anything around here.
Well, and that's how you get to beyond 2 million, is you have that plan.
I'll let you know when it happens. All of the businesses I've started have flatlined at 2 million. Not this one, I hope, but.
Well, I have a feeling between you and Ian, and by the way, this is what I hear a lot. I actually know a bunch of the integrator space. There's actually a community, and they think we, the visionaries, are the worst thing in the world to happen to a business. And it's like, without us, there is no business. Let's just be blunt. There is no idea. There's no inception. There's no man on the moon. There's no, flight. Visionaries come up with the what if, whereas the integrators have to come up with the how do I. And I personally believe we need both in business, because one without the other. And when Gino Wickman shared Walt and Roy Disney, I went, that makes sense, because without Roy, Walt Disney's just some weirdo who draws mice. He's a cartoonist. He's sitting there doodling, whereas without Walt, Roy is a very boring, he's going to be running a chain of locations selling generic product. He's going to tackle Walmart and see if we can be the cheapest, in that space, or, there's the lack of innovation. But when you put the two together, and my favorite tool as a visionary is I've developed a parking lot. And I don't know what it is. I share this with you, Carrie. Just having permission to write my idea down and then walk away from it, it frees me up to focus on other things.
We called it Curveball Monday. And I wasn't allowed to bring new ideas to the team except on Monday for 1 hour. And then I had to shut up until the next. And then in Patterson, or the StratOps system, they call it I think they call it the parking lot there as well. Walt Disney called it the idea drawer, and that was actually created by Tom Patterson, who is the founder of StratOps. So StratOps been around since the 50s, back in the Dale Carnegie days. And I mean, EOS is a relatively new operating system. Phenomenal marketing. Excellent for organizations that don't understand management cadence and don't have a lot of accountability within their ranks. EOS will teach you how to climb a ladder really quickly, but StratOp will show you which ladder you should climb first. And that's the two big differences between the operating system. Tom Patterson worked with the Disneys. Gino Wickman did not.
So he observed. Now, my last question is probably the hardest one, Carrie. So somebody's watched this and they're enjoying our conversation, and they tick the boxes. They're in the MSP, they're growing, they're thinking about an eventual exit, they're open to building a sales team. How do people find you? How do they find your company? And what does working together look like for them? What's the first thing they're going to go, oh my God, this is harder than I thought?
Oh, I mean, anybody that thinks that implementing a sales system is going to be easy is in for some very aggressive disappointment. There is no magic. There is no easy button when it comes to sales. Like, you have to do the work. We'll help you. We'll walk alongside you. We'll give you the tools that you need to be successful, but we're not going to do it for you. And there's some big challenges in our space with people abdicating responsibility to outsourced agencies. So they're taking essentially the first interaction that they'll ever have with a prospect, that first cold call or that first email, and they're handing it off to a random person who's never heard of managed IT. And you know what? I was that person 10 years ago. So thank you very much. But there's a better way. And as a visionary or an integrator, at some point, you're going to have to systematize your approach to sales, or you're not going to be able to recreate the things that are working for you. So you can hand everything off to a third party and just wipe your hands of it. But when it's not working, you're not going to know why. What levers can you pull to get different results? You won't know. You don't even know what they're doing with their time all day, every day. So our business now is almost the polar opposite of what I was doing previously, which was saying like, hey, we tried to align our business with managed IT providers, right? What's your business model? Your business model is, why are you doing your own IT support? You're a lawyer. You went to law school.
Yeah.
What do you know about troubleshooting an IT environment? Nothing. And you shouldn't have to learn how to troubleshoot your IT environment. That's what we're here for. And we're the same with sales. Why are you trying to figure out sales?
Yeah.
Sales is hard. Let us handle that for you. You work on what you're good at, creating bulletproof networks for your clients. We'll bring you those clients. And now I'm saying it's getting a lot harder to have a third party effectively deliver a message for you, mostly because the people that we have access to as third party outsourcing firms aren't necessarily the people that you would hire in your own business. So if you had to interview 10 of the people that worked at my call center and trying to decide which of them would fit in to your company, who would you hire of the 10 people that I'm supporting day to day? The answer would be none of them.
Yeah.
It's a challenging role, high turnover. It's not necessarily a role that people want to look at internally.
Yeah.
So we're trying to push people towards full cycle sales reps where they're responsible for their own lead generation. They're responsible for discovery. They're responsible for closing. And we want account management to be a separate role. But we want the person that lands the account to be different from the person that expands the account.
I love that. And I think in a lot of cases, there's an abdication rather than delegation. It's like, oh, I hired you, you go do it. And I want your opinion on managing salespeople. Okay, I think that just set it up.
It's terrible.
They're a special breed of, and by the way, I love sales. I'm fascinated by it. I will never manage salespeople. They are the craziest of the crazy, and they like the Wild West. And I think there's a lot of visionaries who go into sales because they want to reinvent the wheel. And giving them a system is probably a little like trying to harness a team of wild horses and pull that stagecoach in one direction.
Well, what we're seeing is that when you install a sales system and anybody can do sales, right? Anybody who is willing to do the job can do the job. Anyone who's coachable, anyone who will follow a process can excel at sales. I struggle to follow a process in sales because I find it boring to do the same thing the same way all day, every day. Like I don't enjoy that's why I've always liked appointment setting over sales. The conversation is a little bit different every time. The outcome What I want is a qualified opportunity to put into the next phase of the funnel. Like, so I live at the top of the funnel. That's where I live and breathe and play. But I have to make sure that I'm getting all of, like, in order to get through to the next part of the process, I have to have these specific pieces of information, right? So how I get them, my business partner is not concerned about what I do to get to that point, as long as I get to that point. But that's not trainable. It's not repeatable. So I can't hire somebody and say, figure it out, right? We have to have a process that works. So I always have to take a step back, slow down, document. This worked. This didn't work. This worked better than this other thing. And what I have found now that we can have note takers and AI, and I can take 50 phone calls that I made this week and I can run them through AI, and I can say, like, this is the good, like, here are the ones that had good outcomes and here are the ones that had poor outcomes. Tell me what I did on these ones that I didn't do on those. And then I can start fine tuning it so that when I'm going to teach someone else how to do it, I want to teach them how to do all the best things that I do. And I want to eliminate the ones that aren't working, whether I enjoy them or not, whether I want to have those conversations or not. Like, I own the business. I can do what I want. Now, you don't own the business. You have to follow this process. So that's not really creating great culture, right? Like, Carrie can do whatever she wants, but the employees, they have to do what they're told.
Yeah. Do as I say, not as I do.
Right. So I kind of take I am an individual contributor at this organization. I am not in charge of the sales team. I'm not in charge of anything other than my own behavior all day.
Love that. Well, Carrie, I could talk to you. We didn't even get into van life and other things, but
van life's amazing.
You are a fascinating person. So I'm going to encourage people watching this. If you are in the MSP space, reach out to Carrie and have a conversation. Just know, I can tell you this already. I've talked to her for this little bit. She's not going to tell you everything's going to be okay. She's going to tell you, you got some homework. Is that fair, Carrie?
That's very fair.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me, Jeff.